Earth laughs and flowers, Ralph Waldo Emerson. Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist congregation of Flint. This is our Earth Day service. I'm Terry Cross. I'm a member here at UUCF, and it's my pleasure to be serving as your worship associate. Unitarian Universalist is a caring, open-minded religion that encourages you to seek your own spiritual path. Our faith draws on many religious traditions, welcoming people with different beliefs. Whoever you are, wherever you come from, your whole self is welcome here. Personally, I view life on this planet with awe and wonder and believe heaven and hell is in this place, that we are called to practice kindness and work for justice. I believe the afterlife is a mystery. I'm okay with that. A quote showed up in my Facebook memories. Bats can hear shapes, plants can eat light, bees can dance maps. We can hold all these ideas at once and feel both heavy and weightless with the absurd beauty of it all. Truly, what a wonderful world. It is all I need. If our faith is new to you, find out more at uuflint.org, visit us on Facebook, or contact one of our ministers, Reverend Lynn or Jerry Kerr at the church office. Further insights can be found at uua.org. Announcements. Consider a visit to our church grounds. To walk through the memorial gardens around back, the daffodils are in full bloom, and trees are just starting to bud and bloom. The garden is a beautiful tribute to the people who made caring for the earth a part of this religion. You can also celebrate Earth Day, Earth Month by helping us clean up our church grounds on Saturday, May 8th from 9 to 12. I worked outside here recently. It's a great gig. You work, you talk, you get instant gratification of beautifying this sacred space. I recommend the view of the garden while swinging on the swing set from the playground. Call the church if in need of further details. So also a community opportunity, show your support for Black Lives Matter and make a difference. Please join the member of Flint's Woodside Church on the courthouse lawn every Thursday from 1 to 2 p.m. Show support for a movement here in Flint. I'm remembering our monthly vigils there, same place, for marriage equality, and how exciting it was for that to finally come to fruition. Let us work for a day of true equality for our Black brothers and sisters. See your update for details or contact Reverend Jerry. I also had an update this morning from Danny Weatherall on Jim Getz. Jim is in Genesis Hospital with COVID. He's recovering, but he has a long way to go. Please hold him in your heart. You can find information on him in Facebook or contact Danny. I invite you to join us for coffee hour after the service on Zoom. The ID to join the meeting can be found on our website, Facebook page, and in the e-update. I quite enjoy the chance to see your familiar faces in this new way while we wait to safely gather together again. We will now begin our service with a prelude by Jennifer Howard. flaming chalice is a symbol of Unitarian Universalism by which we begin our worship. Please join me at home in lighting if you have your own chalice. Each day is an invitation to see the world in a new way, to watch it bloom before our eyes like a flower in time-lapse photography, to feel the curvature of the earth in our bodies, and to become aware that we live on the edge of a spinning ball where anything can happen. Marv and Nancy Gilles. Please join me now in reciting our covenant together. Recognizing the richness of diversity, the beauty and wonder of shared worship, and the transforming power of love and service, we gather as a sacred, intentional community to freely seek knowledge and truth, to celebrate the fullness of life, and by our actions to increase goodness and justice.
Good morning. Our opening words are from Richard Gilbert, Beatitudes for Earth Sunday. Blessed are the heavens, for they declare the power of creation. Blessed is the earth, our beloved home, for she is a planet of plenitude. Blessed are the waters thereon, for they gave rise to living things. Blessed is the land, for it is a source of a life abundant. Blessed is the air we breathe, for it fires us to life and to love. Blessed are the beasts of the field, for they are glorious to behold. Blessed are the birds of the air, for they carve a graceful arc in the sky. Blessed are the mountains and the seas and the valleys, for their variety make rich our habitat. Blessed are the fields of grain, the orchards of fruit, for they give sustenance, asking nothing in return. Blessed are the dwellers on earth, for they cherish the privilege of living upon it. Blessed are they who protect the earth and all her creatures, from the plants of the fields to the trees of the forest, for their reward shall be harmony with the web of existence. Rejoice and be glad, for the earth and her people are one.
Our meditation this morning is from Wendell Berry, a piece entitled Manifesto, the Mad Farmer Liberation Front. Love the quick profit, the annual raise, vacation with pay. Want more of everything ready-made. Be afraid to know your neighbor and to die. Do this and you will have a window in your head. Not even your future will be a mystery anymore. Your mind will be punched in a card and shut away in a little drawer. When they want you to buy something, they will call you. When they want you to die for profit, they will let you know. So friends, every day do something that won't compute. Love the Lord. Love the world. Work for nothing. Take all that you have and be poor. Love someone who doesn't deserve it. Denounce the government, but embrace the flag. Hope to live in that free republic for which it stands. Give your approval to all that you cannot understand. Praise ignorance, For what man has not encountered, he has not yet destroyed. Ask the questions that have no answers. Invest in the millennium. Plant sequoias. Say that your main crop is the forest that you did not plant, that you will not live to harvest. Say that the leaves are harvested when they have rotted into the mold. Call that profit. Prophesy such returns. Put your faith in the 2 inches of humus that will build under the trees every 1,000 years. Listen to carrion. Put your ear close and hear the faint chattering of the songs that are to come. Expect the end of the world. Laugh. Laughter is immeasurable. Be joyful, though you have considered all the facts. Go with your love to the fields. Lie in the shade. Rest your head in their lap. Swear allegiance to that is nighest your thoughts. As soon as the generals and the politicos can predict the motions of your mind, lose it. Leave it as a sign to mark the false trail, the way you didn't go. Be like the fox, who makes more tracks than necessary, some in the wrong direction. Practice resurrection.
If you ever wondered how slow molasses really is in January, the people of Boston in 1919 will tell you, not slow enough. On the 15th of January in 1919, in the north end of Boston, a giant storage tank, 50 feet tall and 90 feet in diameter, that had been built 4 years before by the Purity Distilling Company, was completely full of molasses. The tank could hold about 2.5 million gallons of the stuff. It was used to make baked beans and rum, which was still legal in the state because they were not to vote on prohibition until the very next day. A little after 12:30, workers were on their lunch break and sitting underneath the tank, while the Boston Fire Department fireboat workers were also having lunch on the water side of the tank. It was a mild day for winter in Boston, 40 degrees, so more people were on the street than usual, and there was no snow. Suddenly, a roar could be heard, and then the rivets of the tank popped like machine gun fire, and the tank split apart. A 15-foot wall of wet, brown, thick sludge went flooding through the streets, and buildings were knocked down and anything else that stood in the way. One of the sections of the tank hit the elevated train track, but the train screeched to a halt just before the track disappeared into the muck. A jagged piece of the tank hit the men that were having lunch, killing them instantly. A woman in her home died as her house crushed all around her. Every fireboat worker on duty that day was lost. And a wagon driver was found dead later, right where he sat when the molasses hit. Children on their way home from morning classes at Michelangelo's school were caught as they were caught in the current as well. Little Anthony DeStasio was picked up and thrown like a little pebble along with the sludge, as were his sisters. He survived with a severe head injury, while one of his sisters was crushed. The wave traveled at 35 miles per hour, but it receded almost as fast as it came. A Boston Post reporter wrote that here and there struggled a form. Whether it was animal or human being was impossible to tell. Only an upheaval, a thrashing about in the sticky mass showed where any life was. It took 4 days before they knew what the final death toll was. 21 dead, 150 injured. A number of horses were killed and other animals as well. The people that were on scene to clean up could barely get through the stuff that clung to everything. For decades on warm days, it was said that you could smell molasses. In a precedent-setting court case, 119 plaintiffs won a case against the tank's owners. It was discovered during trial that the tank's building had been rushed with numerous safety oversights. In addition, it was discovered that when workers had complained of leaking of the tank, so much so that local children would go daily to the tank and take pails and fill them with molasses regularly from the cracks, that the owner ordered that the tank be painted brown so that you couldn't see the leaks. Furthermore, the tank owners had been warned multiple times that the tank groaned every time it was filled. The case was the first time expert witnesses were called in a court case, and it was the very beginning of safer building practices. After the case, companies were required to use architects, engineers, and building inspectors for all their building projects in the city. And in the future, it led to safer working conditions and environmental impact studies as well. The Great Molasses Flood story was so big that it knocked everything off the front page of the papers, including the next day, the passing of the Prohibition Amendment and the Versailles peace talks.
If you visit an American city, you will find it very pretty. Just do things of which you must beware. Don't drink the water and don't breathe the air. Pollution, pollution, they got smog and sewage and mud. Turn on your tap and get hot and cold running crud. See the halibuts and the sturgeons being wiped out by detergents. Fish gotta swim and birds gotta fly, but they don't last long if they try. Pollution, pollution, you can use the latest toothpaste and then rinse your mouth with industrial waste. Just go out for a breath of air and you'll be ready for Medicare. The city streets are really quite a thrill. If the crime don't get you, the monoxide will. Pollution, pollution, wear a gas mask in a veil. Then you can breathe long as you don't inhale. Lots of things there that you can drink. Just stay away from the kitchen sink. The breakfast garbage that you throw into the bay, they drink for lunch in San Jose. So go to the city, see the crazy people there, like lambs to the slaughter.
I want to say one word to you. Just one word. Plastics. That's what Mr. McGuire said to Benjamin Braddock in The Graduate. By the time that film was made in 1967, big corporations had been making plastics for decades because plastics had made life a whole lot easier and convenient. No one wants to drop a glass bottle of shampoo standing barefoot in the shower, or lug a gallon of milk in a glass bottle. People loved plastic. We still love plastic. It would be practically impossible today to go to the average grocery store without purchasing at least a little bit of plastic. Although we are much more aware of the impact manufacturing and consumerism has on the environment than we did 51 years ago when the first Earth Day celebration was held. Despite over a century of class action lawsuits against major corporations polluting the earth and endangering life, despite endless propaganda campaigns aimed at educating the public about the garbage going into and out of our homes, Americans continue to top the charts when it comes to our throwaway lifestyle. Match that with the lack of political and corporate will and not near enough individuals willing to do their part, environmental degradation is moving along like molasses in January. And we've learned today that that's pretty quick. Although there was not quite the urgency to save the planet as there is today, on the first Earth Day in 1970, Americans had become pretty concerned about the environment. In an effort to raise the consciousness of the country, one of the largest mass protests in our history occurred in Washington, D.C. at the first Earth Day to make everyday Americans realize that our natural resources were finite and that our habits needed to change. Now, at the time, the organizers put much of their focus on corporations as the culprits. They pointed at corporate greed as the creator of our consumerism mentality that put Earth in jeopardy. Just a year later, corporations responded in kind by blaming consumers for polluting the earth with their products by not properly disposing of them in the form of littering. In one of the most popular public service campaigns ever made, the 1971 Keep America Beautiful television and print ad won awards for its anti-pollution and anti-littering message. No doubt you remember this little spot, which showed a Native American man in a canoe as he was trying to navigate an ever more polluted stream that ended with a close-up of his face and a tear streaming down it. Savvy advertisers knew that Native American culture was very popular at the time, so naturally, the biggest polluters, the leading beverage and packaging corporations, dressed up an Italian-American man as a Native American and created this unparalleled ad. The campaign successfully turned attention away from manufacturers and toward consumers who were portrayed as the irresponsible parties who carelessly tossed garbage into pristine waterways. Litterers became the villains in environmental destruction rather than corporations. It also put cleanup firmly in the laps of individuals, and it kind of let corporations off the hook. Anti-littering campaigns helped plastic manufacturers convince Americans that their containers weren't the problem at all, but what were the end users who didn't properly dispose of them. In the end, the first Earth Day cleanup projects and anti-littering campaigns and even Smokey the Bear all led to a groundswell of a new movement in America: recycling. Recycling was the answer to a crowded planet, unclean water, hungry children, and depleted resources. Manufacturers loved the idea of recycling as it focused responsibilities on consumers of products rather than producers themselves. They had to find ways to deal with garbage that they were creating, and more attention was diverted from how things were made. That's why local municipalities got into the act in the 1970s and started the popular curbside recycling programs. Although, as some people remember it, they were not so much programs as they were recycling bins where conscientious, people dutifully sorted their aluminum, glass, and newspapers, only to find out later that those bins were just simply dumped in the same landfills as all the other trash. It was garbage in, garbage out, the same as usual. It was all cosmetic. As one of my friends put it, it was a way for citizens and cities to feel good, but it didn't save or help anything. She says that that's why she and some of her friends started an actual recycling program in her Pennsylvania college town of 10,000 people in 1970. 3 couples from the university put a tiny ad in the only newspaper in town looking for volunteers to set up an actual recycling program. They received permission from the city to set up their recycling program in one of the city parks. Every Saturday, they gathered and waited for people to arrive with their cans, bottles, and newspapers. There, they would sort all of those items, and when they had a large enough load, they would drive them the 70 miles to Pittsburgh, where an actual facility could take care of the recycling. At first, there was only a trickle of people that would bring recycling. But then, the newspaper editor called the recycling group communists with a capital C. Soon, letters to the editor flooded in from Depression-era residents who praised the young people for their efforts. They reminded the residents of the city about the 30s and how nothing went to waste, and everything then changed. With all the press, Saturday mornings at the park became the place to be. Volunteers vied for spots on the can crusher. Although it was labor intensive, since it was all volunteer, they made a profit, and the profits went to fund city parks and libraries. This grassroots recycling program is still operating today, and those that started it are still in touch. Now, you may have noted that this faithful little group never recycled plastic. Well, there was no such thing at the time. Of course, there were plastics everywhere, but recycling plastics was a thing of the future. There was not yet a high demand for it. But in time, the public began asking for that too. A plastic that could be made that was safe and could be recycled as well. as consumers have in so many other instances before, they trusted the manufacturers when they said that they had come up with a solution. Soon, consumers who were concerned about the environment felt it was safe to start using the plastics that were being produced. Although now we know, as the UN estimates, that in 30 years, there's going to be more plastic in the oceans than fish. Nonetheless, in the 70s and the 80s, we loved plastic. Of course, the people in the north end of Boston also trusted the owners of the big tank of molasses, too. It wasn't until that disaster occurred that they learned about cover-ups. And while the flood resulted in the first ever class action suit, exactly 100 years later, not much has changed. Large companies are still being taken to court for negligence for the same kinds of things. In 2019, 100 years later, Chevron lost a class action suit when lawyer Stephen Donziger sued them on behalf of indigenous Amazonians for decades of polluted air and water. In that landmark case, Chevron was ordered to pay $9.5 billion in damages, but they have yet to pay a cent. Instead, in an interesting twist in the case, Donziger has been on house arrest in his Manhattan apartment since August of 2019 for misconduct and fraud by himself and the Ecuadorian judiciary. It's recently been discovered that Chevron moved one of their witnesses they used against Donziger to the United States, and they were paying him. That same witness has since admitted to perjury. Yet appeal after appeal, there has been no resolution in sight. More heartbreaking still is that some of the very people in Ecuador that Donziger was defending have died of cancer from the Chevron pollutants without them or their families ever receiving compensation. This is a full century after that precedent-setting case in Boston that found that a company can be held liable for destruction of lives and environment. Numerous lawyers, Nobel laureates, and Ecuadorian officials are fighting for Chevron to pay up and to get Donziger out of house arrest, by the way. Although the Great Molasses Flood helped make working conditions safe and companies more responsible, the Chevron case demonstrates that corporations are still not dissuaded from unethical practices when it comes to our environment. And today, Chevron is proud to say that they have been building a shiny new plastics manufacturing plant in Texas at a cost of $6 billion. They justify this plant by pointing out that the world has a very high demand for its plastics. Yet, they say, the Chevron's vice president says they want to solve the world's problems in the environment, and so they have committed to 100% recyclability of their plastics in the next 19 years. Well, first, I'm not sure that 2040 is soon enough for 100% recyclability of plastics. And secondly, I'm not sure that I trust big oil companies and their promises. But I don't want to just pick on Chevron here. So if Chevron says they're working toward 100% recyclable plastics, you might naturally ask, well, how far are they right now? Well, this is the bad news. Chevron, Exxon, Dow, DuPont, and others were the subjects of a joint investigation by PBS and NPR, and they found that in the last 40 years, less than 10% of all plastics ever produced in the world have actually been recycled. Let me say that in another way. 90% of all the plastics we have ever used since 1981 are still out there somewhere. Most pieces of plastic film, plastic bags, plastic wrappings, margarine tubs, clamshells, deli containers, takeout containers, anything I haven't turned into earrings, are in vast piles of refuse, are strangling aquatic animals, are giant floating garbage islands, or being burned in the poorest villages of Indonesia. All the huge makers of plastic spent millions of dollars telling us for the last 4 decades that we could recycle their products, knowing that large-scale plastic recycling could probably never be economically viable. Never. Their own internal memos prove that they always knew that very few of their products could be recycled, yet their business was so lucrative that it was imperative that they find ways to sell plastics to us, the consumers. With an ever environmentally conscious public, companies had to tout the importance of plastics and their ability to be recycled. So, the first thing that they did was the Container Corporation of America sponsored a contest to come up with the now internationally known recycling chasing arrows symbol. You all know that one. It looks like this. It's on the bottom of almost every plastic container you see. It was designed by a senior at the University of Southern California for a cash prize of $2,500. It became the symbol to indicate that a plastic container was green. The industry knew that they had to say that their products could be recycled. Could be recycled. That's the operative word. Yes, nearly all plastics could be recyclable in special labs with high-tech equipment at astronomical costs. When that symbol came out, there was no regulation, so consumers would see that symbol and we bought the product. We used the product. We washed the container and we put it in recycling, and we thought we had done well. But most of those things could not be recycled in a typical recycling facility. In fact, if enough of that kind of product was put into a recycling bin, the whole lot was thrown into a landfill, rather than a facility taking the time to sort it out from those things that could be recycled. Disheartening, to be sure. When I first heard this, my jaw dropped. For decades, so many of us have been happily putting plastics into our curbside containers and proudly watched as weekly they were picked up. And we assumed that they were recycled with all the other items, but instead, most likely they were added to the masses of garbage that now even China refuses to take. Yet, how many of you still look at the bottom of a plastic container for that symbol? Or, like me, I yelled to Jerry, "Hey, honey, where does this number 3 go? Is this recyclable?" We feel good when we see that symbol, don't we? We feel like we've been responsible consumers. I feel like maybe I've done something good for the environment, that I'm buying something that's safe. And I used to think that this might end up as a t-shirt, or maybe as a pair of shoes, or maybe as another food container that I'd hold in my hand somewhere in a year from now. Wouldn't that be something? And we pat ourselves on the back and we think we've done something for the common good. But now I realize that it's mostly fantasy. And I'd like to be able to tell you that certain numbers are better than others, and if you just separated those out, everything would be okay. But I don't want to fool you any more than the companies already have. Most of those containers are just plain garbage. Big companies knew it. They knew it was garbage when they put it in our hands, and we should know it when we put our garbage out. I was in tears a week ago when Jerry and I were in the Gulf of Mexico watching a mother dolphin and her baby swimming next to each other in unison. It was beautiful and serene, and they looked so innocent. And as I wrote this sermon, I was in tears again when I read about straws being stuck in the nostrils of sea turtles and dolphins that were dying because they were eating plastic and being poisoned. I'm sad and I'm angry. I didn't want this sermon to turn into advice giving, but I also wanted you to know the truth as I discovered it. So here are the simple facts. All is not lost. But the onus cannot just be on consumers as individuals. We need to demand more from big manufacturers. Make them decrease their carbon footprint. Make them responsible for their toxic emissions. Find out what they do with their waste and how much water they use when they make their products. And stop buying from them if their answers are not acceptable. They will eventually get the picture. Make them responsible producers and let us be responsible consumers. And please, use less and less and less plastic. Invest in the millennium. Plant sequoias. Thank you.
They paved paradise, put up a parking lot with a pink hotel, a boutique, and a swinging hot spot. Don't it always seem to go that you don't know what you've got till it's gone? They paved paradise, put up a parking lot. They took all the trees, put them in a tree museum. They charged the people $1.50 just to see them. Don't it always seem to go that you don't know what you've got till it's gone? They paved paradise, put up a parking lot. Hey, farmer, put away your DDT. I don't care about spots on my apple, just leave me the birds and the bees. Don't it always seem to go that you don't know what you've got till it's gone? They paved paradise, put up a parking lot. Late last night, I heard the screen door slam. A big yellow taxi took away my old man. Don't it always seem to go that you don't know what you've got till it's gone? Paved paradise, put up a parking lot. Don't it always seem to go that you don't know what you've got till it's gone? Paved paradise, put up a parking lot. They paved paradise, put up a parking lot. They paved paradise, put up a parking lot.
Our time for generosity. You gave me what you did not have, and I gave you what I had to give. Together, we made something greater from the difference. Alberto Rios, when giving is all we have. Generosity is strongly associated with a sense of well-being. It comes from a powerful sense of connection to each other as we strive together for the greater good. The gift of your generosity allows us to carry on as a liberal beacon in this community. Donations can be mailed to the church office and can also be made online at our website. Thank you. Your support is greatly appreciated.
May the love that gives to life its beauty, the reverence that gives to life its sacredness, and the purposes that give to life its deep significance be strong within each one of us, and lead us into ever-deepening relationships with all of life. Let us go in peace.
Let us extinguish our chalice, and if you have one at home, extinguish with us. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.